Tonight, we seek to go behind the mask of the UVF. Almost 20 years after veteran UVF man Gusty Spence announced the Loyalist ceasefires,
the combined Loyalist military command will universally cease all operational hostilities.
Spotlight investigates an organisation that has abused the peace to murder 27 people and to intimidate and terrorise its own community.
There is a tendency to dismiss this simply as criminality and not recognise it as politically motivated and as a terrorist threat.
We hear from a UVF whistleblower how the leadership forced their men to attend protests and parades. We ask, is enough being done by the police to combat the UVF?
I can't see any tangible sign that they're moving against these individuals within our community, and that's not good enough.
And we hear from a woman who says the UVF are being given positions of responsibility in the community while continuing their criminality.
It's like the mafia. There's no will there to bring these guys down. The will there is to pay them and keep them quiet and make it look on the surface like everybody's living in peace.
The brutal shooting of a young woman in East Belfast. Gemma McGrath, a 24-year-old care worker, is shot more than 8 times, wounded in the legs and abdomen. She survives, but the attack sends shock and fear through this Loyalist community.
It was horrific. It was barbaric. The idea that it takes a strong man to take a gun and shoot her in any way furthers any cause is an abhorrent one.
The PSNI is treating the shooting as attempted murder. The motive remains unclear. Rumours spread that it was connected to drugs. Those close to Gemma McGrath reject this. The police have not publicly said who is responsible.
The police think the UVF shot Gemma McGrath, and I'm told that's based on an intelligence assessment. And I'm told they also believe that the UVF shot a man some days earlier. So both those shootings, on the basis of intelligence, are being linked to the UVF in East Belfast.
These attacks are the latest in a string of incidents in the east of the city over the last year linked to the UVF. These include street disorder, attempts to kill police officers, and the unveiling of new and sinister paramilitary murals. East Belfast has come to be regarded as the most hardline and dangerous battalion of the UVF. And tonight we learn more about this secretive UVF gang from a source within the Loyalist community who agreed to speak to us anonymously. If he spoke on camera, he believed he would be shot. So we have called him John, and his words are spoken by an actor.
I would argue that the UVF probably see most of East Belfast as theirs. They've built a sizable empire and a fearful empire. I think they're out of control.
One of the characteristics of them is their reputation for violence and their propensity to violence, and that has been illustrated down through the years through both murders and attacks on their own community, and also their propensity to get involved in violence at interfaces.
Our source John says that the UVF in East Belfast uses various connections to bring in drugs.
In East Belfast, if you look at the crimes that have been committed up there, the cigarette lorries getting hit, the local businesses being robbed, you will see that there's common threads, common names being associated with that, being arrested, being convicted of that, and they're all loosely connected with the UVF in East Belfast, and that network helps distribute the drugs in the community.
The UVF has become a criminal enterprise, led by criminals lining their pockets. It's not about defending Ulster.
They have a coherence which is different from an organised crime group, making them a particularly difficult target to operate against.
John says others, including the UDA, are involved in drugs in East Belfast. But he insists the vast majority of drugs are either brought in by the UVF or controlled by them.
the UVF will know who's bringing the drugs in. If it's not them, they will tax them. If they tax them, then they're set up as a permanent thing or a punishment, so they will pay a certain amount each month to the paramilitary organisation. Or they will actually pay the UVF as a punishment for being caught doing it without the sanction.
Spotlight has been given numerous examples of threats and intimidation in East Belfast and elsewhere. UVF criminal activity is nothing new, but the extent of it is, and it's the serious consequences of the drugs trade in particular that's raising concern. Alex Bunting works with the victims of drug abuse. He didn't want to talk about the UVF, but did explain the misery he is seeing in East Belfast.
Families have had to go and take out payday loans. They've had to sell furniture, sell jewellery, things like that. And it's terrible that they're put in that place. And some drug dealers go to the front door, knock the door of the parents and tell them that their son or daughter owes money. And they have such and such time to repay that loan or that debt. So that drives the family into despair. It's not uncommon for the pressures that drug dealers place on drug users to push them towards suicide.
A spate of drug deaths hit East Belfast earlier this year. Spotlight understands that 2 of those who died had links to the UVF, including this man, Ali O'Mackenzie, a close friend of Gemma McGrath. There are conflicting reports about the motive for the attack on her. The family deny there's a link to drugs. But it is understood she was under threat and left the area during the summer. The decision to return almost cost her her life. Thousands of feet on the Shankill Road last month. Loyalists commemorating the formation of the original UVF in 1913. Today in this heartland, the history of the original UVF is proudly commemorated. Loyalist Winton Irvine says it's purely a commemorative parade.
There is no paraphernalia whatsoever that would reflect or represent in any way any contemporary conflict. This is about remembering a very important aspect of all of our history.
During the Troubles, the UVF and the linked Red Hand Commando were blamed for over 500 murders. While it has officially been on ceasefire since 1994, it remains an illegal terrorist organisation. It did decommission, but has not fulfilled a promise that it would disband. It is a situation which concerns Reverend Chris Hudson, who has for years engaged with the UVF and helped to negotiate the Loyalist ceasefires. He says there is evidence that the organisation is recruiting again.
What I've heard is they're recruited not for any military purpose, but recruited into the bands and so on. But at the same time, that seems to contradict the idea of stepping down the UVF. You can't be doing 2 things. You can't be saying we're going to step down the UVF as a military organisation, but we're going to still recruit young men in, and those young men being recruited in will have some expectation.
Spotlight has spoken to a whistleblower from within the ranks of the UVF itself, who says it is recruiting. To protect his identity, we have used an actor to reconstruct his interview, and we have called him Jim. Are the UVF still recruiting?
Yes. Parades, protests. It was a drip feed over years. Will there be new faces at the Brian Robinson parade? There's definitely new faces every year.
Parades in honour of dead members like this one for Brian Robinson are often viewed as UVF shows of strength. But according to Jim and other UVF sources, the size of the parades can be misleading. You've told me you were forced to go on UVF parades.
If you didn't show, it was a £50 fine and sometimes a beating or a slapping. Not a big beating, but a slapping for the no-show. And really no option but to show. Guys were forced to miss work and told, if you're working, you're not working.
Astonishingly, Jim also claims that many members want to leave the UVF but are not allowed to. The going rate to buy yourself out is £3,000. Behind the parades and pageantry, he says some UVF leaders are desperately trying to ensure the organisation remains intact. For those who have suffered at the hands of the UVF, the knowledge that the group is recruiting is disturbing. Since the ceasefire, it has killed 27 people from the Unionist and Loyalist community. The last killing was of a Red Hand Commando member, Bobby Moffat, on the Shankill Road in 2010. At that time, this woman spoke to Spotlight about intimidation in the area.
I can't see it changing any. You know, if you live within these areas, work within these areas, these guys still have control.
The UVF has not murdered anyone since Bobby Moffat, so has the situation changed?
No, I would say it's actually got worse. Now people are so frightened to speak out because if they're prepared to shoot one of their own men for standing up to the commanders, an ordinary person hasn't got a chance of standing up to them.
UVF threats and beatings continue, with some victims being forced to leave the area. Do you know of people who've been exiled?
Yes, I do.
How common is that?
The exile would be quite common. Not out of the country, but out of the area.
Was it not always like that?
No, it wasn't. I didn't see it like that. But to be honest, I was one of these people that thought it was never going to come to my door.
Kathy is a UVF victim too. Her nephew Craig McCausland, who had been involved in antisocial behaviour, was shot dead by the group in North Belfast in 2005. No one has ever been caught for the killing. She is one of very few who will still speak out against the activities of the UVF. Are you afraid that in speaking out you could put yourself in a vulnerable position?
Oh, I'm aware of that. I am aware of that. But I feel that I won't let them stop me, even if I feel I owe it to Craig and his mum to speak out. It's the only way I have of trying to get some sort of justice for them.
In East Belfast, Alliance MP Naomi Long has lived with a death threat from the UVF for nearly a year. Just 3 weeks ago, her office was targeted in a bomb alert. She says she has seen a rise in the number of people coming to her living with intimidation, usually from the UVF.
We have had people who have received threats because they've, for example, had a dispute with a neighbour over a trivial issue, but that neighbour has connections and they end up finding themselves being intimidated out of their home. We have business people who will come to us and say that they can't do their business, either because their staff are being intimidated or because they are being intimidated.
Former Lord Mayor of Belfast, Gavin Robinson, explains that there are scores of people in the area under threat. He describes a climate of fear that is created by all sorts of intimidation, and not just incidents like the shooting of Gemma McGrath.
Individuals are having to deal with this day and daily. They're having to walk past individuals within our community who they know could strike at any time, but who they know are holding a grip and want to maintain that grip upon our community in such a dangerous and destructive way.
One way in which the UVF stamps its authority on the community is with its paramilitary murals, which compete for space with community and cultural murals in loyalist areas. 3 years ago in East Belfast, a painting celebrating George Best replaced a UVF mural. Last month it was painted over with something more sinister. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of publicity about the new UVF mural here in Sydenham. From people that I've spoken to, it's obviously having a negative impact in the community. But as soon as the paramilitary word is mentioned, people find it very difficult to talk. Terry Hoey has lived in East Belfast all his life. He didn't want to discuss the UVF, but he admits the new mural has added to a feeling of decline in the area.
I look at this area and it's definitely not what it was like before.
You know, whether or not it's because of fear,
I feel as if, you know, all the work what has been done, all the good work what has been done, has been undone. You do get worried that it is going to go back to the way it used to be. And I hope it never goes back like that, and I don't think it will. I would love them just to put the George Best mural back up again, but I know maybe they're not going to do that.
The appearance of dozens of sinister-looking men at the unveiling of the mural in September led to frightened calls to the Alliance Party office.
There is an issue about perception, in that while the UVF are seen to be able to, in very visible ways, exert influence and control over the community, the fact that there is no intervention creates a perception the police are either not able or not confident in being able to deal with those issues.
Someone victims have felt able to turn to is this man, Raymond McCord, whose son was murdered by the UVF in 1997. Over the past 3 years, he has dealt with hundreds of UVF victims.
Mothers and fathers sitting at the tables in here, sitting crying, begging at times there when they come in to make sure that their son doesn't get shot. They've maybe approached other people. People didn't want to know. It's too dangerous, it's too risky for it. They're being told to speak to these sort of people.
During the making of this programme, I've had contact with around 24 people who say they're too scared of the UVF to talk to anyone, including the police, about the intimidation they're suffering. Virtually all have expressed a lack of trust in the police, or no confidence that they will take action against the UVF. This perception, right or wrong, is that the police have turned a blind eye to a lot of UVF activity, or not fully confronted it.
I push these issues with police, and I can't see any tangible sign that they're moving against these individuals. It's not good enough that good people feel that they no longer have recourse with the PSNI.
In a bid to keep the peace, police talk to people like UVF-linked community workers to try to prevent scenes like these on the Short Strand in January. Naomi Long warns this is further undermining confidence in the police.
They see the police talking to some of these individuals who actually are the cause of their fear. And they are therefore worried that by sharing that information with the police, they may make themselves more vulnerable. Now, I have no evidence that that is the case, but I understand why that doesn't reassure many of my constituents who are fearful that that relationship is too close.
It's proper that we do engage in conversations, that we tell people what's going on, but the perception then that this allows people to have a free hand is completely wrong.
The PSNI says it is tackling the UVF in East Belfast and points out the convictions of the group's members are usually for ordinary crime and so not reported as UVF activity. But it isn't just over policing that the UVF is perceived to have some type of officially approved role in the community. Our source John says that paramilitaries have forcefully taken over community groups and have cosy relations with politicians and churchmen. He claims they are crowding out ordinary people who are being silenced.
At every level, the paramilitary organisations have infiltrated the community from grassroots right up. And that is a problem because if you're a member of that community in East Belfast and you're going, I want to go to a group, for example, a group that focuses on community safety or district policing partnership or whatever, you go to one of those places and you will find paramilitaries sitting around a table.
This is the public face of Winton Irvine. Here he is at the parade standoff at Twiddell Avenue, sharing the platform with the Orange Order. Orange man Billy Mawhinney threatens a campaign of civil disobedience unless the 12th March is allowed to complete its journey home. And here he is speaking as a PUP spokesman about a dissident pipe bomb attack earlier this year.
There are people who are still intent to use violence, to use bomb and bullets to try and pursue a political agenda.
He also has a variety of positions on community organisations, many of which entail him working closely with the PSNI. He appears to be a pillar of the Loyalist community. But Cathy McElvenny says she believes Mr Irvine also has another role.
He's the commander of the UVF within the Woodvale area.
Cathy says she first came to know of Mr Irvine's role in the UVF because she dealt with him as the UVF man who organised a punishment shooting of her nephew Craig in 2002.
He came to my home as a UVF representative, and I knew that they were taking Craig out to shoot him. But Winky assured me it would just be a graze, which it was in the end.
Spotlight has spoken to a dozen people who have also told us they know Mr Irvine as a senior UVF man, including UVF whistleblower Jim, who says Irvine is his B Company commander.
Winton Irvine is commander of B Company, one of the most violent UVF brigades. It turns my stomach to see him as a PUP spokesman because I know what the history the guy has.
Jim recalls a B Company meeting shortly after the UVF murder of Bobby Moffat in 2010. He says rumours that they were being stood down were quickly quashed by Winton Irvine.
There was 300 people there, and there was certainly a feeling before the meeting that optimistically we were going to get our P45s. We were going to be let go. That was quickly put to bed.
What happened at that meeting?
Well, the next thing that happened, the B Company commander got up on the stage and says, "You think you're here for your fucking pipe and slippers? Yous aren't."
And what did you take that to mean?
No one is going anywhere.
The allegation Irvine is the commander of the UVF's B Company has frequently been reported in Northern Ireland. Nevertheless, last year he was appointed to North Belfast Policing Partnership, an appointment Cathy McElvenny objects to.
To me, a policing partnership should not have a paramilitary commander sitting on it. The ordinary person in the street cannot complain because you're going to the paramilitaries to complain.
Cathy has complained to the policing board about that appointment. She wanted to know how the man she says is a UVF leader was allowed on the partnership, as all appointments are vetted by the police.
The answer to that was that they sign an oath not to take part in criminality or paramilitary activity, and they do not promote by deed or action any paramilitary group.
The police say vetting the membership of policing partnerships is not a matter for them.
The police and community safety partnerships are one of the bodies that the policing board has a direct responsibility for. The police service do not have responsibility for either the formation or running of those. Those are meetings that obviously that we attend, but they belong very much to the policing board.
The policing board said independent members of the partnerships are appointed in line with the Department of Justice Code of Practice. As a policing partnership member, Mr Irvine is pledged not to support, by word or deed, any terrorist organisation. Yet Cathy McElvenny and our whistleblower are adamant that he is in fact the commander of a UVF company, a company that is still active and still recruiting members. Since his appointment last year, he's attended UVF parades and this Ulster Covenant commemoration in the company of individuals widely reported to be senior UVF figures. Here he is at those celebrations. As we've heard, he says these are historical commemorations, but he is leading a group of Shankle men, and beside him are two men who are regularly reported to be senior UVF commanders, Joe McCaw and Harry Stockman, said to be the organisation's overall number 2. Spotlight wrote to Irvine, Stockman and McCaw, along with a close associate, this man John Bunter Graham, who again has been reported on many occasions to be the leader of the UVF. In solicitors' letters to the BBC, all 4 men denied ever being UVF members. In his letter, Mr Irvine said the allegation he is B Company commander is preposterous, and he said he had never been a member of an illegal organisation. But that claim is at odds with the evidence of this photograph of him in the early 90s, walking in a UVF colour party at the front of the annual Brian Robinson parade. In his left hand, he is carrying a wreath on behalf of the UVF. Indeed, allegations of the role of all these men in the UVF have been well documented in reports over several years. Harry Stockman is seen here at the announcement of UVF decommissioning in 2009, where it has been reported he read the organisation's disarmament statement. And this is John Bunter Graham, in a picture from the 1970s with his fellow members of UVF-A Company on the Shankill. Among those pictured with him, the infamous Shankill butcher Lenny Murphy. And here he is with UVF members, interned in Long Kesh. Spotlight has a sworn affidavit from a former detective who says he has long known Graham, Stockman and McCaw as UVF men. And we have two affidavits from individuals prepared to name Irvine as a UVF commander. For Kathy, Winton Irvine is the prime example of how someone she believes to be a paramilitary is allowed officially sanctioned power and influence in the community, while she says continuing to be a UVF leader.
It's like the mafia. There's no will there to bring these guys down. The will there is to pay them and keep them quiet and make it look on the surface like everybody's living in peace.
The ordinary decent people still respect the police, they respect law and order. What they don't respect is the cover-up. They don't respect the UVF being treated on a par with politicians because they know that the paramilitaries are still the criminal elements which are running crime empires in their area.
Over the last 12 months, the UVF leaders who were supposed to have gone away have not just been a policing and community issue, but a political problem too. Increasingly, they have brought their politics to the street, with a declaration of intent on the first night of the Flags protests, which began at City Hall.
They did hijack the Flags protest. I was there on the night of Monday, December 3rd, the night that the attack was made on the back gates of the City Hall.
The impact of the protests and the trouble that followed was immense. Belfast traders lost over £50 million, and the policing bill topped £22 million. Once again, East Belfast UVF were named as prime movers in the trouble.
Senior members of the UVF in East Belfast, as individuals, have been increasingly orchestrating some of this violence, not with the collective endorsement of the UVF per se.
While the Flags protests have died down, the focus has turned to parades. Our source inside the UVF says his experience is that the UVF, as an organisation, is involved at Flags and Parades protests, at times ordering members to take part.
They certainly force people on the flag demonstrations and orchestrate. It's common knowledge they force people to go. People don't have a choice. I've personally seen guys at flag protests who for a long time want out of the UVF. For them to be at the flag protests, it was bizarre as to why they would be there.
The group Raymond McCord set up to help victims has closed down due to lack of funding. Meanwhile, the UVF continue to terrorise loyalist communities.
More people will die, more people will lose their homes, more young people are going to be beaten. And it won't stop.
People are very nervous and very uncertain about the future and what the role of the UVF can be in the future. If they want to move forward and be productive members of society, they do it on the basis that everyone else does it, and that is as an individual with no undue power, no undue influence and no recourse to violence. And unless that line is very clearly drawn, I think we have serious problems going forward.
2 decades after the UVF leadership told us the union is safe, the question must be asked, safe for whom?